Okay, welcome. We are broadcasting today from Telematic Media Arts in San Francisco, where we are presenting the first of 3 artist talks that we're hosting in conjunction with our current exhibition, which is House of Reason Truths, Recent Video Art from Africa. The show was guest curated by Kisito Assangi, and it features works by Halida Bougre, Cesar Schofield Cardoza, Jabril Drame, Victor Mutelekesha, Nyancho NwaNri, Harold Ofe, Minnette Vári, and Haitham Zachariah. My name is Clark Buckner. I'm the director here at Telematic. And today we are pleased to present artist talks by 3 of the artists from the show, Minnette Vári, Victor Mutelekesha, and Nyancho NwaNri. To introduce the artists, I'm going to briefly refer to their bios. So Victor Mutelekesha, Victor's work deals with subjects such as hybridity, diaspora, identity, and the human condition, and has been featured in such international exhibitions as the Venice, Havana, Dakar Biennales. Mutelekesha has been the subject of solo exhibitions at Gallery Palazzo Tito in Venice, the Henry Tayali Art Centre in Lusaka, Zambia, and the Interkulturelt Museum and Kunstnerforbundet, excuse my German, gallery at the Contemporary Art, Norwegian rather, for Contemporary Art in Oslo, Norway. He is the founder of Lusaka Contemporary Art Centre in Zambia.
Right.
Minnette Vári lives in Johannesburg. As Kendall Gear observes in a catalog essay published in 2004 by Kunstmuseum Lucerne, Minnette Vári has in her lifetime witnessed the fall of apartheid and all its structures, followed by the new democracy. In response to this history, Vári has written a history of herself in relationship to this trajectory, one that attempts to recover what is lost, to give shape and voice to forgotten and erased memories. Her work conflates self and history, examining how identity arises out of the traumatic past. In her videos and drawings, Vári frequently depicts her own body enduring a disfiguring metamorphosis. She merges and emerges from nature as well as from the concrete architecture of modern cities. The female protagonist of her video works is sometimes archetypal and sometimes spectral, a persona who ingests and is ingested by time. And finally, Nyancho NwaNri explores African history, traditions, spirituality, ethnic and cultural identity, as well as social and environmental issues. Her work has been shown at various festivals and exhibitions locally and internationally, including Eyes on Main Street Festival in North Carolina, the Hongga Museum in Taiwan, the Video X Festival in Zurich, the Bamako Biennial in Mali, the Nvidia Women's Film Festival in Accra, the Art X in Lagos. As a freelance press photographer, NwaNri's work has been featured in online publications by Reuters, The Guardian, and the New York Times. Okay, so thank you all for being here. And we are going to begin today with Minnette.
I know one can't do like an enormous review of one's entire career, but I think because we are all so new to each other over here, maybe I can just go back to some of my very original first works. The first time that I was working with video, and this happened to overlap a time that this country was in transition, and footage and imagery and, well, the whole archive of it was on display for the whole world to see in various different ways, which was also problematic, because if you look at the the way that mass media functions, it's bite-sized things, so one gets only a small view of something. And I happened at a certain point to be in I don't even know what city, but I've kept imagining it was Detroit, because I was traveling a lot, and it was a very cold winter, summer in South Africa, because southern northern hemisphere, right? Yes, and the whole transition into democracy, or the preamble to it, was on display. The momentous event of Nelson Mandela being freed from prison, and those images of him and our then Prime Minister F.W. de Klerk holding hands and raising their fists together. I mean, history after this, and this is now many years, I'm looking at the mid-90s. So history has been reimagined and rewritten as it happens many times over. But that's all I had. And I was massively homesick. And I kept watching all the big, mass media portals like Sky News and CNN and NBC and whoever was broadcasting. And of course, everyone was on this story. And I could only grab small bits of what was really happening in this country. And it's a strange thing. If you think about Andy Warhol's prints, where he, for instance, has, like a car crash printed over and over again, I think 6 or 9 times, and you go to each one and imagine, I'm going to see more. I need to see more of this, because we are kind of wired to look at roadkill or the details of something momentous happening. And so that same impulse happens when something is going on in the world, and recently with Ukraine, the same thing, that you kind of plugged into all the outlets of news to know what has happened now, what is the backstory, and often you find that these scenes are shared and they're kind of the same, and they're all kind of chopped up into like bite-sized pieces. And it just heightened my sense of alienation, of like, I know there's more to this story, right? So when I came back to South Africa, and this was a once in a lifetime thing, because if you tried this now, they would absolutely refuse. The South African Broadcasting Corporation, SABC, has become like this fortress. You can't enter, you can't exit. It's full of corruption. It's very strange. But I went there, and they allowed me to go through reels and reels of news of that time, of transition, of liberation of this country. And I chose something like 11 scenes that were, to me, iconic of what was happening in South Africa. At the time, for instance, we had a movement in South Africa, the AWB, the Afrikaner Weerstandsbeweging. You can compare that to the Proud Boys in the USA right now. And basically the same impulse and look and everything. So I chose various scenes from that time, and I could go into more details, I might. But eventually, this was my first foray into making video. I had no clue how to do this. And I was commissioned to do a piece for a show. Artists from South Africa were lucky at the time, because because of the politics, we became extremely fashionable in the world. And we were included in so many shows across Germany, into Norway, Sweden, America. It kept going for years. In any case, what I then did to this footage was to take the original footage and edit it so that I retained the original figures just as a reference, and then certain objects in the scene, for instance, a helicopter or a bunch of documents on a trolley, and things like that. And I went into a studio and replicated the movements of these people. Like if you were body searched as you stood in line to go and vote for the first time as a Black person, people were frisked before they entered the hall, right? And those movements, if you take away the original figures, they become kind of weirdly pointless and strange. And this, one of the impulses was that I felt myself implicated in this history without being visible in it, in a way. So I wanted to kind of wear it on my skin and try and replicate these moments. And this was the first time that I shaved off all my hair. And I wanted people to be able to project them onto this blank canvas. And you can never be blank, really, even if you pull down your skin. And, you know, so I emptied myself as much as possible of any kind of identity. And it's a failed mission, really. But let me share the screen and show to you my first video piece that I did. It was made for, I'm going to have to redo this part because I forgot. But it was called Democracy's Images, and it was shown in the Umeå University Gallery in Sweden. So here goes. And I called the work Alien. Yes, so just for you guys to know how this worked technically, was we made a grid where you put a node, a point on all the joints and where the head is of the original people in the video. And as I was trying to reenact all these motions, we applied that same grid to my own body. And so it began to distort my shape and my motions, so that even I've turned off my audio so that I can just think. But even in terms like that tiny little figure, it's still me, but it's shrunk because we put all the spots in the place where it needed to be. So this included scenes from an African Renaissance extravaganza that Thabo Mbeki threw at the time when, you know, everyone was celebrating this new democracy for a long time. Things have changed a little bit, but yes, and there's all kinds of things. Like before, this is a Sangoma, a medicine man person. I'll just show you. These are people being frisked, and this is those politicians holding hands and so on. But it's kind of, you know, there are moments, for instance, with this drummer, where he's also taking part in an African Renaissance show. It became a very hot topic, the whole African Renaissance idea. But in terms of me being me, there are scenes in this video where you can actually see that I'm feeling pretty uncomfortable and self-conscious. This is an iconic scene from this video. It's of a praise singer at the inauguration of Mandela. And in a way, you know, it really brings into the picture ideas around whiteness and ideas around gender and things that have had to be renegotiated and relooked at in this country for a long time, even now, in different ways. I also did a rethink of one of the iconic apartheid monuments of this country, where I went to look at it's the Voortrekker monument. And I made a work that was called Chimera. A chimera is a thing that is made up out of different parts, and it's used in science, for instance, in plants, where you have grafts of different plants into, and it, you know, a plant that grows potatoes and tomatoes on top, you know, a being that is made out of different things. And from mythology, chimera is a figure that is made out of a lion's head, the body of a goat, and the tail of a serpent or a dragon. So she is fierce and crazy and very, very potent in a way. She will devour you, but in a way she first seduces you. And I equated that with the rewriting of a history where it is cherry picked, you know, it's kind of, it takes the parts that fits with your ideology. And it often is, it manifests in, you know, what do you call it, commemorative sculpture and things like that. And, you know, all these gestures like that, for instance, you don't need language to understand that, because it's kind of, it's we will overcome, we will prevail, you know, that kind of thing. And this is the kind of gesture that I was looking at in this history. It's a very large building built on a kopje, which is a hill outside of Pretoria. It's an iconic building in South Africa. And as you enter the Hall of Heroes, you encounter a large frieze in Italian marble, showing the trials and tribulations of the Boers as they moved inland. And it's an interesting thing because in a way, moving inland divorced them from the ports. And that cemented poverty for the Afrikaners. It's a long story, but you know, it's interesting in the way that it manifests through the years. And what I wanted to do in this video was to take something that is carved out of stone and make it liquid again. And I presented myself as the chimera. I wore different masks. I took on different shapes, and I wanted to interfere in these iconic moments of this history. I have a history with this monument because as a child, we were taken to this place yearly to commemorate the pride of white Afrikaner South Africa. I didn't grow up in a home that was purely that. My dad was Dutch and he was fiercely anti-political. So he hated the fact that I was participating in these things. But anyway, that's a different take on the story. And I just wanted you to see that What I did with this is I took an amble, I walked around this frieze, filming those moments, and I really focused on the places where women were involved. So you have little girls casting bullets, and you'll have this old granny cleaning a big gun. It's it's kind of obscene in a way, but I'm just going to show you. I'm screen sharing still. I hope you can still see this. Right, for the sound, for instance, it implicates a very large space, and because I use the local sound of my recording. So there were various tour groups passing through, and this history being repeated and retold in different languages. And every time you repeat a story, it's a little bit different. And so that whole idea of a story that is very it pulls you in. It heightens certain senses of pride and of belonging, and things like, you know, the idea of power. And for me, I try to parody everything. So the things that people said as they passed by my camera, commenting on certain things, like there was a group of Dutch women who said, over here, they were speaking of a replication or a likeness of Dingaan. And so they would say, over here, he's got a different head, different face, different features. So that is something I use because I love to work with serendipity, and the idea of different face, different features, it fitted for me with the idea of chimera. And by the way, this is what the work is called. The work is titled Chimera. And it really tries to take apart, pull apart that history and present it for what it is, as, you know, it is a fabrication. And that's why I wanted also to project it onto fabric, where you can actually see one image through the other. And the whole installation consists of 4 different large screens in voile that still holds the image, but you can also see through it. And the idea of seeing through something, right, is again connecting. So my video that is on this show. So in this video, you've got 3 different elements. Basically, it's the cities. I tried to collect so many skylines of different cities around the world, and also the figures that are approaching us. And then there's the ground, which seems like shifting sands. It's not, you know, it's not solid. It's not stable. And you wonder whether these figures are emissaries from some strange place, or are they coming to do something to us, or are they coming to welcome us? You can't really place your, you know, you can't really discern what their intention is. What I did was to collect different images from 3-dimensional replications of women, including real people, but also sculptures of Hindu goddesses and different kinds of things. And I split them into 3 parts: legs, torso, and head and shoulders, where you have women holding little babies and people smiling, being happy. And it's funny because you never pause this. You guys will know that video consists out of at least well, sometimes 23, but we in Europe and Africa have worked in 25 frames per second. And I have created these figures to appear, each of them for just one frame at a time. So it's a 25th of a second that you see each of these images. So it goes really fast, and it's strange that because often these images are really happy, and I'm pausing this so that you can understand what I'm trying to say. It's like, you know, smiling faces, happy people, but often, you know, and I've used myself here and there, but also Greek goddesses, all kinds of images, carved images of girls and women, and famous people. They're also in there, and but because for some reason you do pick up that they are female, but they also seem fairly menacing for some reason. If you play it, it's not supposed to ever stop. You're not allowed to really see what's happening in there. But if I pause it at any moment, you get images that are, you know, just homely and welcoming. Um, in any case, so I also equated this with a poem by Shelley, who wrote the poem Ozymandias, which is about a vast sculpture that was found in the desert. It had broken off its feet and it was in pieces and mingling with the sand and beginning to disappear. Sorry, my computer is freezing, so it's not playing as it should. And on the stone, the stone of the carving, it said, "I am Ozymandias, ruler of the world. I will never be defeated." I'm paraphrasing because I can't really remember. Um, but and you know, obviously, ironically, nothing stays the same. Things like a place like Aleppo is forever ruined. If they want that city back, it's going to be a different place. Um, and I built this video at the time that Syria is still in crisis, and it's just, you know, a contemplation of things and information that can never be fully understood or processed. You know, we think about the archive of history, but actually, in a way, it's not. You know, although everything is out there to be understood and read and had, it becomes impossible because of the overwhelm of all of this. And in a way, what I used here was, in fact, televisual noise, that to me represents a depth and a vast field of incomprehensible complexity in terms of history and how, you know, how we try to understand who we are, in fact.
So Victor, of course, as it is, and I kind of, for the last many years, I've been living between two places in the world. So I kind of moved back and forth between Oslo and Lusaka, and but it seems that there will be a lot more work to be done in Lusaka because of the project. So I may start spending a lot more time there. I don't have too much money to employ people, so I may have to get dirty with my hands to make things going for the art center. Yeah. Anyhow, welcome to everybody. And so my practice, my artistic practice, kind of I work with multiple media. So I work. Sculpture was when I left academy, sculpture was the main medium that I worked with to express ideas, to explore ideas. But with time, I realized how that derailed a lot of ideas, because I couldn't just compartmentalize things, or rather restrict expressing of ideas to a single material. It became so difficult. And therefore, with a little bit of background to photography and video work, that was a natural course of things to open up my way of expressing ideas, to include, among others, video. And so since 2010, video has been part of my practice, but still sculpture remains a bigger part of my practice. And I will a little bit of a background to my practice as an artist. My journey starts around 2000, when I'm graduating in Lusaka, and in 2001 I got to the academy to study in Oslo, and I kind of as a by the way reference to Minnette mentioning South Africa being a very hot cake, South African artists being hot cakes around that period. I meet Kendall Gias because he teaches me in the academy. He was a visiting professor at the academy in Oslo. It's around that time I meet, there's a gentleman, I think I wrote his name somewhere, Madigida, Churchill Madigida. He was a younger artist. I'm younger than him, but he was a younger artist then.
I know him.
Yeah, I met him around that time. He was exhibiting at the the artist house in Oslo. So that was a very formative time of my career. It was a very, very political time. It wasn't just South Africa, it was the entire Southern Africa. It was a time of a lot of hope. Zambia is turning from a one-party participatory democracy to a multi-party democracy. And at the same time, I'm moving away from the region, coming to study in Oslo. So I'm in a very, very hybrid state in my mind, coming from a very exciting space, coming to a totally new space. And as a young person, you are trying to grapple with all this information that's running around in your head. And coming from being a young artist and becoming a new student, you are also trying to grapple with what it is that I'm going to explore as an artist, that I'm going to hold on to as not necessarily as my identity, but as my what am I going to use to intervene in society? What methodology? What problematics am I going to hang on? And so that's a very exciting time. And as a student, you're jumping on everything else. But when you are just about to graduate, you kind of find your line of focus. And it is in finding a line of focus that I kind of not necessarily discover, but kind of come to terms that I'm actually occupying an extremely delicate position. It's a hybrid position because I am coming from Lusaka, Zambia, and I am in Oslo, Norway. These are very two different cultures and communities and societies. And I've lived several years away from Lusaka. I've been in Oslo for a while, and I'm not yet here. I've started losing a little bit of that. So it's a very, very kind of delicate space. And I'm thinking to myself, I found it, but it's a very uncomfortable space. And how do I then deal with that? The hybridity nature of the self, but also starting to observe the hybridity nature of others. And so being away from home, I began to, I think one of the best videos that I created was one that was becoming empathetic with a human condition that's going on in my country, Zambia. The structural adjustment program imposed by the IMF is running rampant. People are losing jobs. I'm talking to my parents, they can't barely afford basic needs whilst my father is working, and I'm losing my mind. And then the first video was very reactionary, and so was very empathetic to what is going on. Whilst as a student in Norway, I'm having it all in control. I'm reacting to the human condition that is running rampant in Lusaka, rather in Zambia. And so I create a video. It's just a camera on my eye, and I'm sitting in my bedroom. Actually, it's early morning. I've just spoken to my dad over the phone, and I pick up my camera, and I made a video, "Cry, My Beloved Continent." But that was very much in reference to Zambia, but also this is born out of African literature, "Cry, My Beloved Country." And so I am going to show that video, which was one of my first videos that I ever made. And so this idea to relate, you detached but still relate to the immediacy, immediate happenings around your the people that you still have. Of course, when you're born in a family, you there's no way you get detached. You can lose friends, or you can somewhat have an unspoken relationship with friends, but family, you are constantly, you are living your life of in a different geographical space through their stories. You are with them, you're constantly following the happenings, and therefore you are not detached. Even if you are kind of existing in a totally different reality in yourself. And that kind of becomes the central theme. I choose that space of being in between to become that which is going to guide my artistic practice. And so most of the work that follows after this video piece, it be video work or sculptural work, is constantly navigating that very difficult space that only that each person that is unique to each person. It could be a person traveling from whichever country to whatever country and begin to live there. Each one has a unique kind of existence and a unique hybridity of the self. And that to me becomes a very interesting position to occupy as an artist. And this kind of swings back and forth. I am looking at problematics here in the utopia of the world. The Nordics are seen as these evergreen, ever lovely, very human-centered societies, and like everything is all rosy. But even in such conditions, there is a lot to be dealt with. There is elements of being different. There are elements of when you dig slightly deeper, there are colonial tonations in how societies came to be here. Because though, for example, my country, the so-called my second country called Norway, is always looking at itself as this young, very innocent country. It has a history as playing part of bigger powers like Denmark, for example, and having good relation with even bigger powers like Germany. And so one of the problematics that I have tried to engage with in the context of the hybridity of the self and of things was came about after a trip, a collective of artists, not a collective, but a group of artists of us, we made to Togo. And this trip was meant to go and give some kind of initial support to initiate an artist-run space by our friend Ulu. It started out that way, but at the end of the day, I came out of that trip with a very interesting piece of work, the one that I decided to submit when Kisito approached me for this exhibition. And I will show that piece, but whilst I'm talking about it, I'll just bring up this particular piece, this particular video work. When we moved from here with a bunch of friends to go and give support to Ulu, little did I know how much of history, especially colonial history, kind of lingered around the rural places in Atakpame, where Ulu had taken us to be. And so he took us to this bush field place, and we were walking through there, and he nonchalantly just went like, "Oh, Vicky, oh guys, this place here, the one you're looking at now, when Togo was a German colony, here stood an antenna on which the German government and mostly its military fleet would communicate with Berlin, run information between Berlin, its colonies, and back and forth, strategic information and important messages in how colonies were going and how military fortification was and all that stuff. It was quite an interesting story. I almost forgot about it. Several days later, I realized how significant it was to maintaining, the hold, a stronger hold on a people or subjugating a people. And it was around the same time, I think, I'd just finished rereading Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. And this is a very significant little book. Those that have a knowledge of African literature, Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart is one of the most important, but heart-wrenching book to read, but one of the most important book anyways. This relates to the colonization of the continent. And when you are, like myself, an artist that is also very preoccupied with the process of decolonizing, but also awareness of the self with all the baggage of colonial continent that we are coming out of, you cannot avoid but make a react to this sport, because it was a sport that maintained stronghold on its people, but also on the geographical physical space. And I went back to this sport for one purpose, and one purpose alone, to reoccupy the sport. How the thought of how I was going to do it just came up really, really quick. Togo, Benin, it's a epicenter of voodoo culture. It's a beautiful thing that people so brutally colonized have maintained a certain dignity of the self, or of a certain pride in who they still were, and still perpetuates into the future. So what I did with this, by occupying it, I decided to kind of make, to use a sport as a way, to use a sport to send signal of the continued existence of the self. And so what I'm doing here, I'm just making a little fire, and I'm starting to make smoke signals to reoccupy it and use the ancient ways of signaling the presence or signaling message by using this very spot. But what's really going on here, you will see in the video.
tonight is a night of desperate encounter. We are opening ourselves right now to the Holy Ghost visitation. Let him do what I cannot do for myself. Suddenly, Leko Shandala Bariketo Sindalaba.
So when I the visuals you're looking at now, it's myself, and there is the only remaining metallic spot that was holding an entire antenna for the colonial government, the German colonial government, and on it I make a fire, a bonfire, not inside a fire, but a smokish fire, and I start making smoke signals, and the audio, which is very critical, half the work itself, I am playing a sound. I myself, only Ulu, my Togolese friend who understands languages from Benin and Togo, he can interpret, but it's a voodoo sound, and it's such a beautiful piece of music. I am not understanding a thing, and it's playing, and I am making a montage of both visual and sound, and I think it's one of the most enchanting sounds I've ever listened to, even if I'm not understanding. I mean, this is the magic of music and sound. But what I did whilst this piece is playing, I infuse in it two very distinct pieces of sound. One is that of these charismatic Christian churches, what I consider a manifestation, and another one is an Islamic kind of call to worship, because these are quite competing religions, competing foreign religions on the continent, but extremely so like in West Africa. And so these pieces are coming to kind of these two sounds, that of a Christian worship and that of an Islamic call to worship, they come in almost like disruptive noise to dampen the chant, the voodoo chant. And at some point, I also montage in the videos of prayers when we got received. So in this image you're looking at, there are 3 layers of video here. There is the spot at which I'm making my smoke sound. You can see me there in the background. And there is a blue shirted gentleman here sitting. That's a new video that I'm bringing in. This gentleman, he's worshiping, he's paying homage to the gods when we visited the village, and he's wishing us well. And he is not worshiping to the Christian god or to the Islamic god or whatever, but he's worshiping to the gods, to the ancestors, to wish us well and to wish us welcome. And this is quite interesting. The background of what is going on here is that of a normal life running rampant in the streets of Atakpame. But what's happening in this yard it's something that one may somehow refer to as ancient, or something that is decolonized, not decolonized, but something that it was never colonized. It's a very beautiful moment, and somewhat the reflection of Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart comes to my mind. I'm like, the center still holds. I somehow make an internal sentence to myself, a mental reminder that surely the center still holds, because the way this process is going, it's defied so many centuries of kind of bombardments of different ways of existence. But these people, this gentleman that is welcoming us into the village, has defied all these forces of displacement, mental displacement, colonization, and everything. So there was a sense of exhilaration, a sense of hope, a sense of resilience, a sense of defying Chinua Achebe's tragic end of Okonkwo, but saying there is somebody else that still holds on to something that one can build on. And so this is how this kind of project comes to be. And so, yeah, that's the gentleman with his calabash, and kind of his calabash kind of gets infused right on top of my smoke signal as I disappear in the background, and he becomes more prominent in the foreground. And he kind of, I think it was his kind of frame, that kind of his frame, and the louder audio of a chanting young girl in a voodoo song became the most prominent at the end of the video. And so this became a very significant manifestation of my practice, but also manifestation of what I hope to achieve with, for example, the Contemporary Art Centre that we are putting together in Lusaka. It's a very deliberate space that we are trying to kind of lift certain unadulterated ways of being that could become maybe the definers of the definers of the trajectory of what I hope much of the continent can ascribe to take as it tries to regain its path to not long lost glory, but to define the future. So that's yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. It's knowing the piece. It's really interesting to hear you hear how you've taken it up as defining your broader mission with the new center. That's pretty remarkable.
So the concept has been under development for nearly 20 years of my life, and so but the last 6 years was when work really intensified, when the intentions were made, became so obvious. Me having discussions with my very close friend architect, and having discussions with for what it will become, its purpose in society, and how to realize it. I think there was a time when I was such a novice. I thought the availability of financing in Zambia was that was like in Norway, very different countries. And so, but it came to be, it was realized last year in 2022. And in 2023, this year, we opened it.
Well, congratulations.
Thanks.
Very exciting.
Yeah, so thank you all for that. I will try to keep this as concise as possible. So Clark already did introductions, but as he said, I'm a a lens-based artist. I'm a documentarian as well, and also an African cultural researcher. And it is this hunger to delve into our history and our cultures, and mostly our spiritual traditions on the continents, that have sort of led me to where I am right now. One of the things, part of the things that have led me to where I am right now. Lens-based art for me started out, in fact, I started out, nowadays I correct people when they call me a filmmaker or refer to one of my works as a film, and I'm like, okay, I'm not a filmmaker. I don't see myself as that, even though I did start out calling myself a filmmaker. But then I realized at some point that the things that were in my head and were coming out in my work didn't quite fit in the film world. I remember the very first piece I created, it showed at a film festival, and it caused a major argument in the festival because it became a debate as to whether is this a film, is it something else, is it a trailer? And the room was divided. There were the people that were vehemently defending it. There were the ones that were saying, no, this isn't a film. What is this? Let me go ahead and show that.
Can I maybe just also say that I teach video art at UJ, the University of Johannesburg, and they've recently started referring to this subject as new media. So now, and I have a colleague who is a filmmaker, and now we have this tug of war between, you know, what is film and what is video art, and it's a very enormous gray area. So I understand your pain.
Right. It's not actually a pain for me. I actually enjoyed the fact that people were, because for me, that's what it is to get people thinking and get people feeling. So it was a win for me. I was happy that my work was able to spark conversations, because that's the key for me as an artist. I'm not there to make people get it. I'm there to invoke something. And for me, that was a success because it did invoke. So this was the piece actually.
La reine, la majestueuse, la maîtresse qui casse tout, qui inonde tout, qui disperse avec une telle force qui commande la soumission totale. Enfant de la mer, moi, enfant de la mer, au fond de la mer, je demeure. Elle qui terrasse, qui anéantit, qui anime, qui fonde, qui purifie, qui nourrit, qui donne et qui nous remplit de nouveau. Elle est la mer, et moi, je suis Mami Water.
So that was it. That was the thing that kind of set it off, and it sort of pushed me in the direction, pushed me further, knowing that the feeling I had was actually, the feelings were in the right place, because I didn't feel like, because when you talk about film, people think of a linear narrative, telling a story from start to finish, that sort of thing. And it just wasn't the kind of work that was being channeled through me or that I was putting out. So it led me on this, it made me kind of delve deeper into the things that really, would I say, inspire my work or fuel my work. I'm looking at, you know, things like I said, I'm a cultural researcher. I have this eagerness to dive into, like Victor was saying, go to Atakpame, look into Vodou, go to Oshogbo, look into Isheshe, go to, I don't know, Oka, look into Ordinani, that sort of thing. And as I do this, as I travel around and have these experiences and share with everyone and talk to this person and talk to that person, the things that are really catching my attention is like sort of realizing and experiencing how storytelling is really anchored in our culture as Africans. In fact, we live storytelling. We're like living storytellers. Everything from even the clothes we wear, down to the music, down to our prayer. If you look at African spiritual traditions, the way we interact with the forces is very much through storytelling. If you went to a Babalawo, for example, and asked him to divine for you, the divination actually comes out as a story with characters and all of that. And then you have to break it down. The Babalawo himself will break it down, but then you yourself have to apply those characters into your own life to really get the answer that you're looking for. So these are the things that really drive me as an artist, not just as an artist also, but as a human being, because as an artist, your work is your life and your life is your work. I don't think you really can separate both things, you know? So I'm looking at that. I'm thinking about, you know, other, like the depth and layering of storytelling in our culture, in our history, in our traditions. I'm looking at the griots of Mali, Gambia, Senegal, how they are literally walking libraries, walking historians that can recite a person's lineage back to maybe the 10th generation or even beyond. And how do they carry all of these in their minds, you know? What are the instruments they use to execute this storytelling, and how does all of this kind of intersect with what I'm doing also as a storyteller in this time? They were the storytellers of that time. We are the storytellers of now. They bore witness to history, and that time we're bearing witness to history in this time as well, you know? And all of that drove me to start delving into, I went through this, I started out with that work. It went further. I then started to kind of dig deeper into the materiality of the medium, because when you look at video and photo lens-based media in general, traditionally it can be quite one-dimensional, because at the end of the day, a picture is a picture, right? You take it with a camera, you either print it, the paper is flat, or if it's a video, you're projecting it on a flat surface, or you're showing it on a screen. So for me, the motivation there is to push beyond that, you know, and start to ask myself, like, how can I bring more materiality into this medium? It's video, yes, but then how can I make people touch video? Can a video be touched? If the video is touched, then what texture would it be? Is it going to be soft and light and airy? Is it going to be a very thick, if we're calling it fabric, is it going to be very thick fabric that has lots of texture? And, you know, I'm also thinking of how many ways can you push this medium beyond its boundaries, beyond its traditional form, you know? How can you create work, or how can I create work using this medium that's more immersive than the traditional one-dimensional form? You know, how do I add depth to the work? How can I invite people to interact with this work with more of their senses rather than just looking? Because if we stick to the traditional form of video and photo and lens-based work, you're working mostly with the eyes and the ears, but we have a range of senses. And the key for me as an artist is trying to draw people in with more of their senses. Can I make something that will make people want to come closer to the work and touch it and step into it, rather than just standing back and observing? How do I drive participation with the work, with this medium I'm working with, you know? How do I get people to smell a lens-based work? You know, how can that be infused in there? Where does the olfactory sense connect with the with vision? You know, what are the intersections of all of that? And also with this work, I would say I came through all of that. I could show some other work which I created, which is also very performative and all of that. So I came from all of that to a place where now I'm looking at, with this work, for example, how can I make it or allow it, I would say, to shift as a medium and adapt and reinvent itself to fit the spaces in which it finds itself, because I remember, Clark, when we were setting up with the exhibition, we talked about how it should be installed and all that. And I mentioned that my main concern here was not necessarily, I'm not too focused on the size or some other variables, but the material is important to me. And therefore, because the work itself speaks about adaptability, then the installation itself becomes something that is adaptable, it's fluid, it's malleable. So for me, it's sort of like transforming something that would otherwise be fixed or immovable or unchangeable into something that's now fluid and adaptable and can morph itself to enter into any shape it finds itself, any space it finds itself, and take on the character, the essence of that place and fill it up and invoke something within that space, rather than just focusing on the work itself. So this particular piece, which is showing right now at Telematic, is called Here, is sort of the embodiment of that for me, coming through that journey of starting with traditional film. I worked in the film and TV industry as well, and going on that journey as an artist to where I am now, and this work itself being kind of like the springboard for me to take it up a notch, or like the springboard to jump into other things, because now I'm looking at, where's the intersection of, like Victor mentioned, sculpture with video? How do those two come together? I'm looking at, let's go back to the griots in Mali and Gambia and Senegal, and I'm thinking, where do their kora and my camera meet? Because the kora is their instrument, my camera is the instrument. Where do these things meet? How does Bogolan cloth, the weaving of Bogolan cloth, from Mali, tie in with the weaving of my stories as a video artist? Like, where do those things meet? So I see it as sort of like exploring the intersections of our histories, the histories that have passed, and the histories that I'm living now as an artist, because I see myself as a channel, as an instrument or an embodiment of these histories. Because like I mentioned before, my work itself is really about me. It's about my life. Yes, it's about the histories and the cultures and the traditions, but all of this is channeled through me. So I see myself sort of like the witness to all of this. I'm bearing witness to this, but I'm also sort of like a messenger that's channeling these messages through these mediums. So for me, the things that drive me is sort of pulling on all these influences, all these things that are going on around me, the things that have gone on before me, the things that are going to go on ahead of me, and bringing all of that together into a work or a body of work to kind of evoke thoughts and feelings and ideas and memories and things like that,
Thanks again for your presentations today. Frankly, I've learned a lot, and I'm struck by the intersections in your work because, despite some, basic parameters and so forth, that really it's each of your strategies is very different. The work is aesthetically different, and yet there are some really consistent themes and concerns. And specifically, each of your work negotiates or is heavily informed by concerns of spirituality on the one hand, and history on the other, or I mean, among other things. But I think that that's a real interesting intersection. I don't know if Minnette included this in her presentation, but in Minnette, in your notes about your piece, you talk about it being an apocalyptic scene, but then understanding the apocalyptic in I take it religious terms, is in terms of revelation and so forth, right? That there's kind of a spiritual frame for that. At the risk of reopening everything, can you speak to that? How spirituality and history inform and intersect in your projects?
Definitely. You've really touched on a nerve in that sense, because the apocalypse does relate to the tearing of the veil, and it is about revelation. And in a way, my entire project, and I mean, we spoke about, we skimmed the surface, I think all of us as artists, in terms of what we are about and what we are doing. And look, this work of mine that's on the show, Quake, is it's 17 years old or 18. I haven't counted. It was made in 2007. But the idea of revelation, I have an absolute an acute sensibility of arts, the ability of art to reveal, to make clear, to make clarity. And I've done it, in my master's study, and this is very long ago already. But the idea of art that creates a unique opening in the fabric of our understanding, that is in every case of a very good work of art, it's a unique opening like this, through which you can guide people to come to realizations that would reveal themselves to themselves, I think, in a way. And one of my guiding principles is the word aletheia. It's a Greek word. You will be aware of it, and you might all be, but lethe is the river of forgetfulness. And you pass through it, over the river. As you die, you go to a place where you forget everything about your previous life. But aletheia is the opposite of it. You bring things back, and you bring memories back, and it's through a combination of spirituality. And I really resonate with the idea of as above, so below, and that kind of thing. And so my works are incredibly layered. There wasn't space in this conversation to really dig through all of that, but it's stacked. Even as I edit, my compositions reveal how I think, because it's many layers. It's like a lot of things going on, and you tap into that. And you kind of begin to layer your work in a way that you attract certain thoughts and certain people and certain things about them into the work and through the work. And the work is, it's just a thing, it's just a composition. But for me, it's a cleaving of that secret place where you cleave through something so primordial that it will touch people, even, you know, through across cultures, across ages. And I'm extremely passionate about that. So my project in life for me is, in a way, to go through the process of experiencing and creating moments of revelation. And it's very rare and it's very rarefied sometimes, but to me, that's the guiding principle through which I work.
Victor, you want to take that up, that question of history and spirituality?
Yeah. I don't know how to speak about Europe. I mean, I'm not so much from here. I'm more comfortable to speak about where my origins are, where my umbilical cord is buried, as we say, Zambia. And so, and when you mature as an artist, you always, and when you sit through everything that you've ever done, all the experiments you've ever done, I think you come to a point where you hold on to something that you feel, this is my, this will be not necessarily legacy, but this will be my contribution to the betterment of the human condition, kind of. I'm going to dive into this because it feels right. It feels, there's nothing else that feels more right than what to do. And almost always you get back to these two, but also to many other elements. I mean, it's, history, as it were, as no matter how convoluted it can be, no matter how told or untold it would be, it will forever be a significant part of your practice, because you are slicing through stories and retelling certain stories. You are finding difficulty to understand a certain story because something just doesn't add up. I need to dig into this, slice it up, open, figure out where the falsehood is, or where the reality, the truth is, and trying to either make amends by correcting or confronting the writer. So we are always in that state of mind as creatives. We are never satisfied with what has been told, because we always know that, for example, most stories are told by the victor, not the losing part of things. And when you are empathetic, you're empathetic with the loser sometimes, especially when you understand the legacies that are left behind through these wars of conquest. And therefore, history is never far away from what you're doing as an artist. The first piece that the video piece that I first showed, it was very much a historical context of a nation at its worst. A visitor to the space, or when it's been exhibited, would see just an eye tearing up. And then when you understand the context in which the eye is tearing up, at what time of day, and what's informing the tearing up, then you realize it's more than just an emotional attachment, but it's an economic catastrophe that is going on in the background. What is this economic catastrophe? It's a history of a nation that is coming out of a one-party participatory democracy, a nation that's coming from a homegrown socialist state, a nation that is at its knees going broke, a nation that is being imposed a system of way to get yourself out of debt. That's a history of a people. That's stories of a people. Those are economic catastrophes that are embedded in one single frame. And spirituality. Spirituality governs us, whether you are, an inverted commas, as a Christian would say, an unbeliever, or I think Muslims have a word for people that do not believe in anything. You are something. You still have a sense. There's a certain compass. There's a certain way of perceiving the world beyond the physical. That's given. Our ancestral beliefs as well. That being part and parcel of who we are, we cannot, there's no way we can run away from it because we are part of it. Therefore, spirituality remains an overarching element that influences how you work and what you intend to communicate as a creative. And this, when I'm going to make reference to the piece that I am exhibiting with Telematics. It's very, very, very spiritual piece of work, as much as it's a very, very historical piece of work. And my intentions are very deliberate. The spiritual aspect of it is when I am looking at the legacy of the two main outside religions, what they've done on the continent, for example, the kind of antagonistic existence of the two main religions on the continent, the division that's on the continent. And I am deliberately superimposing over there too with this very old tradition that has always been the defining element, even before the infusing of these old of external religious traditions with a very indigenous spirituality, and hoping that the very indigenous spirituality seems like making a plea that let me hope that the indigenous spirituality takes over, and let's see how the continent progresses by testing what we have always had that stood a test of time and stuff like that. Yeah, that's what I can say. Yeah.
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 Now, you want to speak to it?
Could you please ask the question again?
Well, honestly, I was just struck by how, despite the variety, the differences in your work, that they are all very rich with considerations of history on the one hand and spirituality on the other. And actually listening to your responses too, in a way, maybe a third pillar is like the self in the context of the spiritual, in the context of the historical, sometimes as a site of resistance, sometimes as a site of change, and the hybrid, the chimeric, the transformative. Yes, but sort of thinking about this, like the, registering history on the one hand, while also registering a spiritual awareness. Yeah.
Okay. So for me, that shows up in the sense, I guess you've seen the work I'm presenting here and also probably read the text about it. It's very much steeped in spiritual tradition of Yoruba people of Nigeria. And the tradition itself is history, right? Because it dates back to such a long time. So for me, it's not necessarily two things that are separate, but somehow two things that kind of blend together seamlessly, that one doesn't exist without the other. History is the tradition, and the tradition is the history as well. If we delve into the spiritual tradition we're talking about, like I said before, you find that when I mentioned that thread of storytelling that goes through all of this, these are stories and poems that no one can actually pinpoint when they were written. They're so old, they come from such a faraway time that no one has any idea when this came about. But at the same time, I remember one time I was sitting in a divination session and I heard something that I can't remember exactly what it was in that session, in the poem that came out, the Odu. But it was something that sounded very contemporary. I'm like, our ancestors were thinking about this at this time, you know. It was something that was very modern, very contemporary, very now. But then this is coming from something that we all know to be so old. So I'm asking myself, like, how did this come from there to here? Does this mean that over time, historically, these poems have sort of morphed with the time? Is there a kind of changing or updating? Because I don't know that any such thing exists in terms of looking into the sacred poetry itself. But then this thing came up and it brought up that question and made me start to think, like, how have these things transformed over time? How has history, how have the things that have occurred in the years that have rolled on and on as we have continued to practice these spiritual traditions kind of influenced these things that we know to be so ancient? How do they take up space as something that's so ancient but still so contemporary, you know? So for me, it's that sort of blending of the both of them that sometimes is apparent, sometimes isn't, but it's a marriage that has no clear lines, if I would say that. It just mixes itself in such a way that is seamless. One is the other is the one, sort of thing. I don't know if that's, you know, clarifies it properly. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that. You know, you're talking again about storytelling. It's a real interesting feature of your work, but I think it's also true of all of your works. An interest in stories, the legacy of stories, the power of stories, but using non-narrative form, right? That it's stories, and yet, yeah, again, explicitly, we're sort of resisting the conventions of form. Can you speak to that? Do you recognize that as a tension in your practices? Like Nyancho, you're talking about, yeah, not wanting to be a filmmaker because that implies a certain kind of like narrative arc, and yet clearly you are a storyteller and you're mining the legacies of stories.
Yeah, so for me, like I said, the reason I shifted away from calling myself a filmmaker and want people referring to my work as film is because it doesn't show up as that, right? It doesn't show up. For example, let me throw it back again to what was the fabric I used? Bogolan, for example, which comes from Mali. You look at this piece of cloth, this textile, and it actually is a story, you know. But you don't refer to the person that wove the cloth as a storyteller, right? He or she is called a weaver. So for me, it is sort of like these things that like you said, I mine into informing the storytelling, but not presenting it as in the form that kind of, it just doesn't come as a linear thing for me. Even in terms of how the work comes to me, it's never linear. I tend to think in images. Sometimes they come and I'm able to maybe keep them in my mind and say, okay, I'll do this later. Sometimes they just float away. It's the same thing with sometimes when I write, because I write as well. And it's just never linear. It's a feeling that comes up. It comes with images sometimes, it comes with words. Which ones am I able to filter through and capture and then sort of gather together into a body of work based on what is informing that body of work? And like I said, the work itself, as an artist, let me speak for myself, as an artist, my work really is about my life. even the piece that's being shown there now, in the text, it speaks about a certain piece of poetry that inspired it. But it inspired that because at the time, that was sort of the space I was in. That's why I resonated so much with that piece of poetry. And then it catalyzed all the thoughts and feelings that came through and then was channeled as this piece of work that we're looking at now. But none of that happened in a linear way, because life itself is not linear, you know, and I'm literally just channeling what comes through. Like I said before, I see myself as a messenger, but also a witness. So as I'm bearing witness to this thing, I'm filtering it through my own self. So this is where the self comes in and intersects with the history that has informed who I am now, the current situation or condition that I'm experiencing or exploring. And still somehow all of that is filtered through the spiritual aspect, because it's such an anchor for who I am as a person, not just as an artist, even in my everyday life. None of these things happen on a straight line. It's not even, it's an ebb and flow, but also a spiral, but also a zigzag, but it's so many things meshed into one. So for me, it just doesn't, the linear just doesn't show up in any of that.
Could I add to that in a way? Because I like, this has not come up in this exhibition because, to be honest, it's the first time that I've allowed this work of mine to be shown in a loop with other works, because almost, apart from maybe two, but out of all my video works, everything is a seamless loop. So you walk into the space at any given time, and that's your beginning for this. And it's an experience. It's not, and I tell my students often that a video work is an object. It's a thing. It's you have to think about it as a three-dimensional thing. Many years ago, to a lot of my own embarrassment, Harold Zeeman, who directed 2 consecutive Venice Biennales, nominated me for a sculpture award for Chimera, in fact, the one that I shared with you with the diaphanous screens. And I got such pushback from the whole industry over here, because how dare you, you know, it's video, you know, but actually it's properly three-dimensional. It's light penetrates through space, you know, it occupies space. But anyway, many years ago, well, I did a series of drawings and thinking of weaving of cloth and the weaving of a story. The idea of when you lose your train of thought, you lost the, you know, the, what do you call it? The weft, and I was thinking a lot about this and referring to Goya's painting of Los Atropos. It's a combination of 3 women. It's a young one who is weaving, and she makes the thread. I forget most of their names. Atropos is in fact, the old woman. It's maiden, mother, it's that trope. It's maiden, mother, and crone. And the maiden is weaving, and she makes the thread. And that's the thread of your story. And then the mother comes and she measures the length that you get. Up to here is what you get full in life. And then the granny, the crone, comes and she has the scissors and she ends things. So it's that idea of finiteness, but at the same time, it's woven into the story of the family, the history. Yeah. And
Victor, am I right? You are performing in your piece, yes?
Yes, I am.
Is that consistent in your work? Are you consistently performing or frequently performing?
Yes, actually, most of my my image pieces, my video pieces, I'm very much present in them. my even sometimes sculptures. Most of my major sculptures that I've made in the last 10 years, not 7 years, I've been body casting. So there is a lot of myself present, because I find it to be, the self is a very interesting material. It's readily available first. Practically, it's economical, but also you are more you know yourself much better, on all levels. Therefore, you can place yourself the way you want yourself to be placed, to express an idea. It's the most honest material, the self. So therefore, I place myself in positions. Yes.
Yes.
I like that a lot, because it's true. It's like you are the available material. You
Yep.
are, you the first interface to the world that you have.
Yep.
And often, people might think it's narcissistic or whatever. Fine, but it's also something else. It's kind of,
That's true.
it's the true passing into a history that is absolutely unique, although it relates to the world,
True.
And often I think art itself is a religion for one, because you have your project and nobody ever in your life is going to believe in what you do as much as you do.
True.
So, it's kind of, and I like that idea of that being very honest. It can be, it can be twisted into other things, and it happens in this world of TikTok, etc. But we are on a different mission completely.
True.
Yeah, Nyancho, that's in your work. That's another version of the intersection of art and life, right? That you're actually performing the work, and there it is,
Yes.
sort of living the performance, and vice versa.
Yes, that's right. For me though, it's not always the case. It kind of depends on the what's being spoken about and the feelings that come through. If I feel it's something I should embody, then I will. If I feel like it isn't, then I will get someone else to do it. So for me, it's not a peculiar or a common thread in my work. The work itself dictates who, where, and how it wants to be disseminated.
Yeah, I think actually, in terms of how we work, and in a world of very much heightened sensibilities and sensitivities about who owns what and who can say what about a thing or an issue, it's terribly, terribly pertinent in one's work that
True.
there are certain moments where you cannot speak the language of that thing, the thing right next to you, but it's just so different, you can't reach it.
Yeah.
So it's painful, it's difficult, it's a very sensitive, delicate negotiation.
Yeah, I mean, this idea of kind of fear to engage, because there is all these there are multiple gazes, there are multiple platforms that are ready to pounce and tear things up. The social media has become too powerful to even become relevant as a creative. So you're always walking a very thin line. I remember when we were in Togo, when I was realizing that project, there was a project that I wanted to work on there and then, parallel to this piece of work that I'm sharing with you. And then in the process of creating that, I had to have another person, a female from Atakpame, that was a willing participant. And when I started working taking video work with her, doing what I was doing, my colleagues that I traveled with were like, "What the F are you doing? There was multiple interpretations that scared the crap out of me. I just backed off. I literally backed off. I couldn't go beyond what I'd started. I have the footage of that. I've never shown that footage to anyone because I became so conscious of the critique in the moment of creating that. And therefore, the self being, I can use and abuse the self without feeling a sense of guilt to anyone. And so there will be no repercussions. I mean, as long as I keep myself alive and I'm not injuring the self.
That part's important. Stay alive.
So please
Survive the
don't.
work. Survive the work.
Well, this has been terrific, and I'm sure there's more we could discuss, but we probably ought to wrap things up. And thank you for your presentations today and for your time, and again, for your contributions to the show. I suppose we can formally sign off to our audience here, and we will have 2 more of these, and they will be posted in conjunction with this one. So thank you again for your presentations. And
Thank you, Clark. Likewise,
guys.
thank you so much. And thank you to Minnette and Victor as well.
See you both in our in the other side. We'll meet.
All right, then. Take care.
Good guys.
Thank you. Take
Okay.
care. Bye.